Welcome everybody to the second episode of the G63 series. Today I'm going to start with the very basics. So if you're an advanced user, it might not be too interesting for you, but I thought for completeness, I'm starting to with the very basics as well. So we're going to import the HDR, map it a little bit only, and then import the car itself, which is already a little bit prepared. If you're interested in getting more information about how the G63 itself was prepared in terms of materials and stuff, please let me know in the comments, and I'll think about creating another series for that, but because this one is more around the integration in the environment and all the rocks and everything. We start with importing the HDR, which I got from HDR Haven. Again, the link is in the description box so you can get it as well. A quick tip at the beginning of the tutorial. Usually I have my layout set up in VRED. So if you go to Window and then Layout, you can create and save layouts that basically store the modules and windows that you had open at a certain point. So I called it baking because I used it when I was light baking the G63, but it's actually a pretty good set of modules that I usually use. So if you just click that, you can see that all those modules are popping up on the right side. This is usually my working setup. Of course, you can adapt it to yourself, whatever you like, and then save it or save it as, give it a name, and then you can always get back to this when you start working and you don't have to open all the menus individually. Okay, but let's go to the material editor and create an environment, a sphere environment in this case. And we have the Canon 24K. So I've downloaded the 24K version of HDR Haven. Usually if the HDR is too low in terms of resolution, you can only use it for reflections, and you should rather use backplates or something for rendering, because otherwise it looks a bit strange if you have a blurry environment background. But 24K is pretty nice, so we get a pretty crisp environment as well. And let's just leave VRED a little bit of time to get things loaded. This is the current, the way it comes in and the way it is mapped. As you already see, we might want to adapt that a little bit because yes, there will be those pieces and we will overlay them with rocks, but we can also make it a little bit nicer. Something that I did as well is my car standing here, and I wanted to stretch that area a little bit. So I've basically just went in, and this is something you can do based on what you think makes sense for you. So I'm selecting the dome, rotating it first so it's aligning with, let me stretch it a little bit so I see it better. Stretch it like that, and now I'm aligning it with the direction I want to stretch it in, which is here. And here we go, reduce it a little bit, and always make sure that you look from inside, because the distortion is always only important based on your view, right? Based on the area that you place the car in. So something that's important to me when I did it was that this rock is not distorted, because I want to just block the view up here, and I need this as a background element. So let's try to do that a little bit more. Stretch. Nope. As you can see, you need to basically stop before the distortion to avoid the distortion of a certain aspect. And now you can see what I meant. So here the rock now appears to be going up, right? And this is exactly what I wanted to have, because this should appear like a hill that is going up, and we have the rocks in the foreground that are blocking this a little bit. And now you can see that we actually have a pretty good plateau to work on. As I already said, we are covering up a lot of that stuff as well, and also here, because I want to extend this plateau, otherwise the car wouldn't fit. Okay, but you can see it's already pretty nice, works pretty well. The car will be somewhere here. And talking about the car, and this is something we adapt later on anyways, so don't get, I don't know, too detailed now, because you want to make this environment work with your whole scene later on in combination with the rocks and everything, right? So let's just keep it that way. It looks pretty nice from the inside. That's what it's all about. We will work with a closer field of smaller field of view later on. So the shots are done in 28. So this will be the eventual view that we will be looking at, and the car will be here. So as you can see, in a lot of cases you don't see much of the environment, right? This is like the idea of having this full angle to work with. I think that's it already for the environment. I didn't do much to it besides mapping it a little bit, but yeah. Let's take a look at the car. Let's import the G63. So I click on import and I have the clean version of the G63 here. You can select a lot of things that you want to import or that you don't want to import. So don't want to import basically anything besides the materials and the car. So I'm removing animations just in case there are still some animations on the car. And yeah, then I just click import and wait a little bit until VRED imported the dataset. Okay, so we do have the car imported now, but as you can see, it doesn't really work, right? It doesn't look as it looks in my video. So there's one thing that, as I said, we need to adjust the environment depending on the scene a little bit, and we'll have to adjust that later on as well, even more. So I've selected the dome, and there's two ways to manipulate environments in VRED. One is by adjusting the dome, but you don't adjust the projection. You just adjust the geometry that is the HDR is projected on. On the other hand, you can also adjust the projection in the environment material itself. So if we select the environment material, there is this transformation aspect, and usually environments are recorded on a 1.5 meter, which is 1500 millimeters, on a Z-axis, so on height, because you usually use a tripod to record them or to capture them. But in this case, we get a lot of distortion here, and I want to have this stretched a little bit more and create this plateau. So what I'm doing is I'm increasing the height, the Z-axis of this mapping in the material, not in the geometry. And by that, let's try out 5. And you can see we're talking about something completely different already, right? So we get the nice walls. It's looking way better. We have this plateau. Of course, we will have those bushes because they actually are there and we need to cover them up, but we have way better ground to floor the car. But on the other hand, there's also problems coming up with this hill being unrealistically high. So what I did is I stretched that a little bit and move it. But this is, as I said, based on your preference. And by that, this looks a bit better. It looks like a pretty steep one. But as I said, this is a view that I don't want to use anyways. So let's focus on this view. And this looks pretty nice from my point of view. We'll cover that up with the real stones. We have a nice hill. We don't have this, or we have this wall, which we can cover up with some stones in the foreground. And yeah, we have a pretty good base. Maybe we could rotate it a little bit around C, like that, maybe like that. So we have it standing on this plateau itself, but you can already see where this is going. And this is something I would encourage everybody to try out, right? This is, as you see, this is not about realism, like the realistic mapping. It's about making it work for whatever we want to visualize. Okay, but that's it for the environment. Okay, so the next step will be to bake the light. And for that, I already told you in the overview video. If you didn't see that, check it out on the channel, that I've created this sunlight to make this fake light effect in the interior of the car, because I wanted to have it look more heterogeneous. For that, I double checked the environment a little bit and said, okay, where's the brightest spot? It might be somewhere here, but I've actually prefer, as it is overcast, it's definitely unrealistic anyway, so I prefer the light to come from here. And there's a pretty cool trick in VRED if you want to position a light not manually, but by feeling, let's say, where the camera is and stuff. So just move your camera to where you want your light to be. In my case, it's something like that. I want to have the camera shine in that, or the light shine in that angle, and then I create a spotlight and I go to transform in the spotlight and just click on get from camera. And you can see that the light is jumping to the position where my camera was. So we have the light up here. And that's it already. We can turn off the shadow on shadow material because we don't need that right now. And it looks pretty, yeah, I don't know, not very good. And that's the setup already. We need to increase the amount here to 100, but you can, this is depending on the distance as well, right? So don't take that 100% accurate, play around with it how you like it. And then we can either use temperature and change temperature of the light, or we just go into the light color, select a warm yellow and make it a little bit like a sunlight color. And that's it already. So next step is to bake the light. So we go to the bake light and shadows module. The cool thing in VRED, not sure if you know that, if you right click on the main access bar, you will get all modules. So I usually never use like interaction clipping or whatever, but I just right click here and go to C clipping because it's easier to quickly find. So this is a quick access menu that I heavily use for when I'm using VRED. So don't get confused that I'm using that. Might be a good trick for you to speed up your work as well. But let's talk about the bake light and shadows. So usually it comes like that. We have vertex-based lighting, and there's two ways of baking light in VRED. One is based on vertices and one is based on textures. Based on vertices is super easy, super quick. You don't need any UV layouts. You don't need light map UVs, nothing. You just need a fairly high tessellated geometry, and then you can just bake it on it. It's great, but it's not as detailed as it can be with textures. And that's why in the video that I created, on the clip that I created, I used the new texture-based light baking. For renderer, because that's going to be ray traced, you can either choose GPU or CPU. I have a pretty powerful GPU, so I go for that. Then high transparent objects like the glass and stuff, that's fine. I'll go for light and shadows, so I'm not only computing the ambient occlusion or the shadows, I want to compute everything and really bake the scene. And then enable separate illumination, something that I don't need. You would need that if you wanted to, I don't know, bake an additional light effect on top of an already baked scene. For example, ambient light in the interior, or maybe the headlight light distribution on the floor or something, but we don't need that in our case. So don't turn on override material, because if you do it, VRED is going to override your material color with that one. So it does this usually to stay neutral. So you can switch the colors of the interior, for example, later on, because that's a pretty known use case in VRED, or common use case. But in our case, I don't want to switch the leather color or the outside car paint color. The car is going to stay like it is, without any variation. So I'll keep that off. That's fine. We use denoising. We use dynamic resolution for the light maps between 64 and 1K per light map, and VRED will automatically define, based on the size of the object in the scene, what size of a texture map it needs in terms of resolution. And something that's important here as well, in my case, I had this gaming asset already, which has okay-ish light map UVs with it. So I'm using those light map UVs. But you could also, if you don't have them yet, you need to compute them. So you can choose between unfold and triplanar and layout. And then it would override your existing ones or create new ones when you bake it in the baking process. This of course takes longer, but basically this whole baking process is a one-click process, including the UV layout, which is pretty nice. So enough talking, let's select the full car, everything. So you can see we're selecting all parts of the car, and I'm just going to hit calculate, and as soon as that's done, we'll continue and take a look at the results. Okay, so the baking is done. That's the result. As you can see, it looks pretty nice. We got the dynamic light situation in the interior of the car, with a small line on the headrest as well, and in the bottom of the car. So just as I wanted to do it, or as I did it in the video as well. yeah, one last thing, just for us to make it look a bit nicer, is to bake the shadow plane. We use the same settings for that, and quickly bake it. So just a quick explanation why this is setting up the scene and building those acceleration structures. We are in OpenGL right now. To be fair, now not anymore, but before the light baking process, we are in OpenGL, and as soon as we hit light baking, we go into GPU ray tracing. So VRED is preparing the scene as if you would switch this ray tracing mode on. So if you plan to bake one part after another because you want to troubleshoot things or whatever, it makes sense to go into GPU ray tracing already in your basic mode, because then you avoid the upload onto the graphics card or the conversion into GPU acceleration structures when you render. So this is happening every time. You can see now we're again in OpenGL. So this is happening every time I'm baking something, it's going into GPU ray tracing. But I could also just bake the whole thing in GPU ray tracing, and I could save this step, just as a quick tip. Okay, so we have the car grounded pretty nicely. You see the plateau already that I was using. We're going to cover up some of the pieces later on with the rocks. We can turn off the spotlight because it's just meant for the light baking process. Looks really nice, but let's double check if everything worked out. So if you want to really troubleshoot, let's say, light baking results, you can go into visualization and then pre-computed illumination rendering, and you're going to see that you only see the light results now. And yeah, it's not a surprise. This car looks pretty good, but you can see there is one issue, and I want to explain to you why and how you can resolve it. So this checkerboard-like artifacts happen if the light map UV doesn't look proper or isn't unfolded properly. So if we select the part and go to UV editor, you can see that it's not unfolded properly because it is one solid object and VRED doesn't know where to cut. So we need to help there. So we go to the edge mode, shift select one of the outer or the most outer lines. And now just holding shift and I'm double clicking, so it's selecting the whole edge loop. And then click cut edges, go back to the main mode and unfold and layout without sewing. And then we should get two nice pieces. Yep. And we rebake, because now of course the texture or the baking is wrong. We rebake here and you'll see that the problem is gone. It's a bit of a bad example because it didn't matter, because it was a glass object, and the glass shader is just ignoring the baked light and shadows because it's a transparent object. But you will recognize, or you'll see that for other objects, maybe, I don't know, it happens for you on the door handle or on other parts where it is important. So just wanted to give you that hint with you. If you have this checkerboards artifacts somewhere, it's 99% based on a solid object that wasn't unfolded properly on the UV light maps. Okay, yeah, looks perfect. Looks exactly how I wanted it to be. We go in later when the rocks are there to rebake the whole thing, but to make it, I don't know, look nicer already during the work. So we see some progress as well. Wanted to bake that. One last thing before we end the episode. If you want to turn it off and see the differences, there's also the bake render options. So you can turn off the elements that you baked and turn them on again so you can see the differences. And yeah, I think that's as far as I wanted to take it in this episode. So hopefully next time we'll take a look at the stones and the rocks and place them correctly, and then go from there, from lights, camera, animation, and so on and so forth. Again, if you have any feedback, feel free to put it into the comments. Also, if there's other stuff that you are interested in that I'm not covering here, feel free to put it into the comments and let me know, and I'll do my best to answer it either in one of the next episodes or maybe in a different series of tutorials as well. With that being said, hit the subscribe button. Hopefully next week there will be the next tutorial, and thank you everybody for watching, and yeah, have a great day. See you next time.